Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining this webinar today. I see we have about 40 people in the room and the number is going up. So maybe people will join as we speak, but we're on time. So let's start with a quick word of introduction about what we're going to discuss here. So my name is Laetitia. I'm the CEO of Greenly. Today we're going to talk about CSRD and this compliance challenge and the opportunities it brings for companies. And for that, I have the pleasure to welcome Marcus Letertz from PerkinElmer, which is a large American company that has tackled the challenges of compliance with Greenly. So we're going to talk about our joint experience. We're going to talk about the evolutions of regulations. We're going to talk about being American and working with sustainability. So a lot of interesting topics to cover today. Maybe I can give you the floor, Marcus, just to quickly introduce yourself as well.
Sure, no, happy to. And thank you, Laetitia and Greenly, for the opportunity. So yeah, my name is Marcus Letertz, and as you might hear from my name and accent, I'm not actually American. The company I work for is American. I'm based out of London. We're a very global organization, and I look after corporate communications and ESG, sustainability, broadly speaking. I'll come to our peculiar journey in a little bit, I guess, as we kind of speak about CSRD and how we addressed it together with Greenly. But in a nutshell, PerkinElmer is a scientific instrumentation and laboratory services company. So imagine you walk into a research lab, be that in the life sciences sector or in what we refer to as applied industries, such as batteries, new energy, but also microprocessors, etc. So we're in a very large number of industry verticals that we address with our machines, basically instruments that allow researchers to understand and characterize materials, the purity of materials that they work with, and that go into some of the products that we use every day. So yeah, that's PerkinElmer in a nutshell. 1.3 billion and 1.4 billion, sorry, in revenue, and 5,000 people roughly across the globe. We're present in 75 countries. So yeah, I guess our challenge is a peculiar one, and we'll come to that a little bit later. And I've always been involved in sustainability. I consider it to be an important part of what a company stands for. So, and as sustainability has become more technical and more regulatory driven as well, I've also kind of grown with and along that journey, basically.
Thank you, Marcus. So before we move on to your and PerkinElmer's experience, maybe we can give a little introduction on what is CSRD, because even though we speak about it, we've been into it for a while, so we know about it. Maybe not everyone is familiar, but CSRD is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is a directive from Europe that has been already implemented in local regulations for 20 countries, 20 European countries out of 27, and which gives a framework, a joint framework for sustainability reporting to all companies, with obligations of reporting for certain sizes of companies. So in the CSRD text that has been adapted, companies above 250 employees with different waves of application between 2025 and 2028. And this regulation is today reopened, rediscussed with the omnibus discussions. So there might be a simplification of the ESRS or of the data points to report. There might be a delay. There might be an additional framework called the VSME for the smaller businesses. So a lot of change are moving, a lot of changes are evolving, but those are regulations. And maybe the interesting thing here is to discuss the strategic aspects of those regulations, like how reporting on your sustainability as a company is not only a tick the box for your legal compliance, but also strategic advantage. And so maybe that has to do with the fact that you're American and not European. So that's my question for you. My first question, Marcus, is why CSRD? Why do you are you looking into it? Why are you complying to CSRD? And how does it translate your global sustainability strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think also what I perhaps should say is that basically our revenue is generated pretty much in equal parts between the Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. So EMEA represents, of course, a sizable chunk of our revenue, and therefore there is a high chance that, of course, the combined or the combination of legal entities that we operate out of European countries will, in some way or form, affect and impact us from a regulatory perspective. I do want to just take it one step back and clarify that even though we're an 85-year-old brand company, we are de facto only 2 years old because we've been acquired 2 years ago by a private equity fund. The current scope of PerkinElmer was a business unit within a larger entity and has been bought by a New York-based private equity fund. And basically what that meant is all of a sudden we found ourselves with a functioning core business, the value that we provide to customers, but no support functions. So we had to urgently rebuild all of our operational foundations. And we had effectively also lost all of our ESG credentials that we had prior to belonging to a larger firm where we were just I would say, a business unit. So obviously, focusing on that means for us, not just, as you rightly said, it's not just a compliance exercise for us, because we also inherited contracts, especially services contracts in the life sciences field, where we had mandatory contractual clauses baked into our contract. So that means that we had to urgently look at how do we, first of all, understand where we're at. So the data collection piece in an organization which is building all its support functions is difficult. There is the cultural aspect as well, as you might imagine, as a US company and a predominantly US-based leadership team. There isn't necessarily a lot of understanding or prioritization for ESG matters, especially in a turnaround situation. And then, of course, to your point, there is, of course, also the compliance side of things. It's not just CSRD, because the more jurisdiction operate in, you have to start looking at what that means as well when you submit your financial details to, or when you file your taxes, basically, as an entity. So all of that needed to be prioritized for us. And ultimately, the way we address this and create a sense of urgency, because we were threatened and still are a little bit in a difficult spot with some of our key customers, where we currently don't quite comply with the contractual clauses that we've inherited from before, is that basically it's a business enabler. ESG has to learn to talk the language of business. I'm sure many of you already do this, but I cannot state this enough. The other thing, of course, also is don't position it just as a reporting requirement. It is about creating the transparency and the understanding of where your business stands at any given time on its sustainability journey, in order for you to focus on what you can improve. Because ultimately, when you're part of someone's scope 3, you're obviously expected to progressively improve your ESG impact and performance. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, Laetitia, but I think that's about as precisely.
So to give a bit more context about the risk assessment, it's true that one main aspect of CSRD that it was pretty new is this question of double materiality. So it's basically knowing how your company, not only how the climate change and the environment impacts your company, but how your company can impact the environment. And this is a basic risk assessment that should be conducted by all companies, it's healthy to know what are the long-term risks for your business. So so double materiality. Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt, it's actually a fantastic way to sit down your executive committee around doing the exercise of of materiality assessment, because it really is a 360 view of how important ESG is and how it impacts the business. So it is a fantastic way to engage through a workshop or something together with your leadership teams and go through that exercise.
And so before we deep dive on double materiality and the rest of CSRD, can you tell us more about how you engaged the other strategic decision makers of your company into this process? How did you make it go away from just the ESG department, but to be like a real strategic discussion?
So yeah, it's several things, and again, I think every company is of course different. And as I said, running into the cultural challenge was no small feat, because I think that was the biggest hurdle, to be perfectly honest. In addition to, of course, the fact that operationally speaking, we didn't have the capacity to collect the right data. And I think there's two things. First of all, as I said, speak the language of business. So with some of the business leaders, I had a conversation, and basically as we kind of did the inventory of the contractual obligations that we had with different customers, we just started adding up the potential business loss or the fact of being excluded from contract renewals, what that meant in terms of revenue loss. So I can tell you that gets the attention of
Yes.
pretty much any C-suite member. And then the second part was, creating that sense, I would say, of urgency, not just from a compliance perspective. You don't want to do scaremongering, but you also actually want to try to tie that to your culture. What are your beliefs? What are your values as a company? Can you tie it to your, I would say, fundamental, the raison d'être, so your fundamental value proposition. What does your company stand for? Because that, again, it connects the dots. It basically means that, yes, ESG is a part of the company's fabric, belief, and the promise that you make to your customers and all of your other stakeholders. And that might take a little bit of time. But I think, again, you have to do both, the stick and the carrot, so to speak, at the same time if you want to get anywhere.
Absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of people here have questions because they are going through the same thing. So don't hesitate to ask questions in the questions tab, not in the chat. That would make it easier at the end to take some questions. So diving right into it, how did you go about your double materiality? How long did it take? Can you tell us more about the way the stakeholders involved, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I think, first of all, we did, so my predecessor, I've been with the business for a little over a year now. So I joined after the company had been established as a standalone. Sorry, can you still hear me? I sense that I'm frozen. Nope. Okay. The reason why I mentioned that is that a predecessor of mine had done a very high level and I would say, basically a desktop exercise, double materiality assessment. So we basically started building on that primarily. Sorry, I get the sense that I'm stuck. Can you still hear me?
Your video is stuck, but we can hear you.
Yeah, that's a great picture of me right there. So
yeah, maybe turn off the picture and turn back on. That may help.
Yeah, I'll just continue. Hopefully it'll come back. Basically our...
And he's gone. I think he lost his internet connection. Let's wait a minute for Marcus to come back. I've seen, and maybe I can start answering some questions. I've seen a question in the chat about CSRD changing to 1,000 employees. That is a risk. For now, we have the Commission who made a proposal to the European Parliament, and the European Parliament is considering all of the all of the propositions from Omnibus package. We were at the Parliament yesterday with some member of the European Parliament to educate them on the question, and we had the chance to have some real-life examples of companies who are working on their CSRD and who see the advantages of having a unique framework to report on instead of having several ones. So you can find a replay of our discussion at the Parliament on Leaf Media. So I encourage you to go or to email me or Chloe to get the discussion. But very good insights on how we can simplify CSRD in a smart way and making the ambitions of the Green Deal still intact. So that was for the question of will it change? It will probably change. There are propositions in that sense, but we don't know exactly what will happen now, what will be the thresholds. So we'll wait for it to be voted at the European level and then local level. Hi, Marcus. I was doing a digression on the Omnibus package because there was a question, but I let you take where you stopped.
Yeah, so sorry about that. No idea what happened. So yeah, I was saying basically we were building on a previous version of a materiality assessment, which was highly incomplete. So what we were going about basically is we pre-digested all of the data that we had collected with Greenly. We knew that there was little time and appetite to spend on developing, I would say, an executive level workshop for this. So we basically built our plan on I would say, a draft version of our double materiality assessment. We also work with our shareholder, by the way, who also provide a lot of resources and access to well, first of all, our shareholders, because even though we're private equity owned, we have different shareholders that are invested in a fund. But essentially, the idea for us was to make sure that we assign ownership for different subject matter areas of the double materiality, and basically make sure that we had pre-briefed all of the senior leaders on what is expected of them. That then really provided us with a much more productive way of also operationalizing and making it tangible, dare I say, as opposed to making it a theoretical or ideological exercise. So really, there was a lot of preparatory work going into this. I have to admit that we're not quite finished with it yet. We're not quite satisfied with it yet. It took much longer than it should have. But this is, again, due to our internal processes more than anything else. But again, the way we really approached it was making sure that we tackle key business issues first and really assign ownership, not just sponsorship, by the way. An important distinction there is to not just nominate sponsors, but actual owners at the very senior level, because they then also own this together with their teams and support your ESG roadmap throughout the year. But yeah, so basically, one of the reasons why we also delayed it a little bit is that we realized that actually, fortunately, dare I say, CSRD will apply to us a little bit later than anticipated. So we do have another year, which we desperately need, given where we are in our journey. So this is more a question of perfecting our double materiality approach more than anything else.
So would you say that it's useful to have started 1 year before you actually had the obligation to kind of do a dry run? We're seeing that quite often, so interesting to see your views on that. Aren't you duplicating the work, or are you preparing better?
No. So for us, it really is about being better prepared. And again, I think one of the challenges that we had, for example, there was a sense of urgency for us to report through certain frameworks due to contractual obligations and regulatory obligations. What we did in year one was, and again, I don't think this would have been possible without Greenly, is we were unable to collect activity data for all of our data collection. So we went for spend data because that was the only option we effectively had to comply within the timeline that was available to us to make sure that we have a basic understanding of the impact. So for us, it very much is about refining our approach since we have more time. But it's also about, we've just made a strategic decision because we're a globally operating company to say there are so many frameworks that we are being asked to report into, industry specific, country specific, regional, state specific in the US, California, Illinois, and those will probably still remain in place despite what's going on in the US at the moment. So we said, okay, we're going to take CSRD and that framework basically as our North Star, because it is probably the most comprehensive one. And by making sure that we tick all of those boxes, we basically create a data foundation and an insight foundation that allows us to easily plug in and extract the data we need and to format it in the best way possible into different jurisdictions where we need it, into different industries, et cetera, et cetera. So it is about refining, I would say. It's not about duplicating the work. And again, that ownership side of things took a little bit more time than I would have liked, to be honest with you.
Okay, great. And so having this data, so you talked about a data hub or a place where you can find all data for different frameworks. So you're doing this with a platform, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So does that help versus Excel, or did you never tried Excel, so you wouldn't really know?
No, we actually do know, and yes, it does help. So we are, because we're obligated also through our shareholder to report into their platform, which is a different framework. We're still, again, also using the Greenly Excel template to actually collect internally first, given the complexity of the business and also what the business is used to, and then upload that into Greenly. What it allows us to do is by using the Excel data foundation. Oh God, I hope I'm stuck again. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you at least, but.
Okay, I'll switch off my camera real quick.
Yeah.
And then essentially what it allows us to do is, because there is about 70% overlap in the way it is all structured, we basically are then able to use the Greenly Excel template to translate that over into the other template that we need to report into.
Good.
But essentially the idea is to basically use, moving forward, we already now are getting a lot of requirements from customers, for example, to isolate the environmental impact of only the products and services we sell to them. So this, again, we would not be able to do without having a common and well-structured data hub.
Okay, fantastic. And so now let's talk about data collection. And I see we already start having questions about it. So can you please give an overview on how you went about collecting this data in your complex organizations with many different stakeholders? How did you engage people into it? And then we may address some specific questions afterwards.
Yeah. So again, given the fact that we're a very lean organization, so time is probably the most precious commodity that we have within the organization. So how do you get people to spend time on collecting activity-based data in particular? Because at this point in time, we're not able to have a centralized system from where we can extract all of that. So there's a couple of things. First of all, we mapped out the sites that have the biggest impact, and obviously that's the manufacturing sites. We then engaged with our VP of production, making sure that we are able to again generate that buy-in and make sure that the site leaders, the manufacturing site leaders, will actually support our requirements. So we then did regional. We ran regional webinars, for lack of a better word, training webinars, where we first of all explain the why. I think it's extremely important to focus on why we're doing this. This is not just corporate requiring more data. It's not to annoy people. Again, this is where that narrative of ESG as a business enabler is critical. It helps also, to leverage the, of course, the regulatory side of things. There's, again, through your storytelling, this is why, having both the communications and the sustainability hat on actually helps, because I think a lot of the narratives that we push in order to generate buy-in have to be carefully crafted. And then based on that, we created, again, using the tools that are provided by Greenly, we have a small group of people within the company who support this on not full time, but only on a part time of them helping us within the region to chase the people who need to provide the data. It is a little bit laborious, and I think for 2024, we had this, I would say, very manual approach of then uploading it into Greenly. The next step for us would be to make it more systematic as well, and make sure that you don't, in October, realize that you have to collect the data for an entire year, but really make it a monthly process. So again, this is very much about data governance and how do you engage people around the people who own the data and have the data. So I think part of your plan, your ESG plan, a big chunk of it is about data governance. It's, of course, enabled through the tool, but if you don't have the right governance in place, it'll be difficult for you to get the right data quality and on time.
Good. We have a first question from Ofazul, which is, from an operational perspective, could you share how you overcame the barriers to improve the process for the data collection and quality? So you mentioned a little bit how you were managing data collection, but more on the process and the continuous improvement. For example, in terms of activity-based or physical data?
Yeah, so as I said, our year one collection was a little bit messy in the sense that, and imprecise. And we realized that there were a lot of inaccuracies because we made a lot of assumptions about the business that we didn't properly plan out because we didn't have the time to. We were really focused literally on just getting the data and uploading it to whatever system we needed to. So for us, it's basically about creating a data collection work stream, a continuous data collection work stream, which does nothing else than that. So I'm, by the way, also in the process of hiring an ESG data analyst, whose job it will indeed be to do nothing else but that, making sure, plugging into the different systems of the company. We are also adopting a new tool from a procurement perspective. So we will make sure that from a supplier engagement perspective, we ask the right questions, that the system that is being used by our colleagues in procurement is easy, that we can easily extract the data and transfer it to where we need it to be. So I guess that it requires a data analyst mindset. I genuinely think that is probably a critical hire for us to make sure that this person understands the various systems in the company, understands the nature of the data that we need to collect, and is able to analyze, extract, process, and analyze and report all of that data. So I think creating a permanent work stream with a clear roadmap for that person is critical, because if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So and you can certainly not report it. So I think again, I don't know how some of you are doing it out there, but in our case, given that we are not a very mature organization from a data management perspective, hiring this dedicated ESG data analyst resource is going to be a critical addition to maximizing the value we get out of a system such as Greenly.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe before we move on to more questions, just to conclude the presentation side, do you have any advice or any best practice recommendation from your own experience with CSRD that you would like to share in general?
Well, contrary to what it might sound like, is but just don't wait. Of course, in our case, we have the luxury of having a little bit more time, and we genuinely do need it. But if you're in a slightly better position in that respect, don't underestimate the time you need to engage with your organization. I think that is where you'll have the biggest hurdles. That's where you have the biggest challenges in terms of realizing that you're not in charge fully of your timeline. It's a project that, of course, you set up, but the reality is ESG by its very nature is so cross-functional. And what I've, again, from experience noticed is that ESG is always going to be a secondary priority when it comes to a function's primary priorities, so to speak, in the sense that if something happens, and as you know, business is full of unpredictable events and surprises as well. So just make sure that when you plan out your kind of CSRD timeline, that you bake in enough buffer from a timeline perspective in regards to your deadline. So I think that is absolutely critical. I think you do need solid project management skills. Actually, I think anyone who and hopefully you already have those. But even I would say when you manage your CSRD, your ESG team, I think even spending a little bit of money on a basic project management training course can be extremely helpful, given the complexity of the ESG environment, what you need to achieve, and the number of people you need to engage with. This is critical. The other thing is, get CEO buy-in. I think, and this is again where you need to talk to your communications guy if it's not you. Make sure that at every town hall, at every meeting, you make sure that ESG is in one way or another prioritized, and that there's at least some messaging in there. For example, we, given also the manufacturing nature of our company, at the beginning of all of our meetings that involve more than 4 people, we have what we call safety moments. So safety moments where somebody shares a small risk that they've identified in a factory setting, office setting, for people to be aware of. You can do the same with an ESG moment. Think about simple stuff such as recycling. So everybody can do this. So make it palpable for people. Allow people to own a contribution that they can make it tangible for everyone, not just the senior execs. But I think, therefore, what might be interesting for you to have along with your project plan is also a communications plan in place with a good narrative.
Great. Thank you so much. And maybe before we move on to the questions, I see a lot of questions, so I want to let some times. But I'm interested into the American standpoint, maybe taking a step back. What we're hearing about greenwashing in the US. So we mentioned a little bit at the beginning how you were engaging your stakeholders, whether in Europe or America. But I was wondering, how is it to evolve in a country which has this situation right now when you're a ESG professional?
So again, I think there's a few things. First of all, avoid politicizing your ESG journey. I think that is not helpful because you realize that your employee base is made up of people who voted in either way. So you don't want to politicize it. And that's why I mentioned earlier the critical importance of making sure that the language of ESG should be business language. That removes the emotional side of such a conversation to begin with. Then, of course, to give you an example, the DE&I policy, this seems to be a very contentious issue in the US. Again, we have to be sure the way we're going to be tackling it is we have a global, very generic people policy, as we call it, which is still value-based and informed by our values. So we're not compromising on our values. We're changing the language around it, but not necessarily what we stand for. We then have to be realistic about things because we're a globally operating company. And in some countries, there are clear legal obligations in regards to diversity. There's reporting involved, etc. So what I'm currently doing is encouraging and working with HR is to establish localized DE&I policies, which we're not going to call that, but we basically have to make sure that we're still compliant and that we're still aligned with our beliefs as a business. So I think the only way to do that is in a two-tiered approach, is to almost like a conglomerate, basically, where you have a master policy at the top, which is very generic, which won't take umbrage with the political realities on the ground in the US. And then at the local level, make sure that you have the right policies in place that you need in order to operate and comply with local regulation. Also, don't forget in the US, that's the federal level. At the state level, at least for now, the state level is still sovereign as well. California probably won't be changing their ESG frameworks anytime soon, nor will Illinois. There's a few other blue states that have such regulations in place. We just have to be flexible and agile and make sure that you work your way through. But very clearly, if you do business with the federal government and if your business depends on federal government spending, it becomes a compliance issue, I think. Well, there's a compliance issue politically speaking, and that's where I think you need to work very closely with your general counsel and public affairs people to make sure that the language you choose it carefully.
Great, that's fantastic. I feel like the outcome of your experience is that I'm hearing a lot business strategy, risk. So we're not even talking about compliance anymore, but about something that makes your company more competitive. And that's the argument that you're using to embark the strategic decision maker of the company in this project and make you more competitive in Europe, but also worldwide.
Correct. Yeah, 100%, because ultimately compliance is, there's a compliance risk. And if, for example, such is the case, and I'm sure there might be some people on the webinar whose company are in a business to government business model, and therefore your compliance risk is also a business risk. So because if you are considered non-compliant in an OECD country, you may be excluded from public tenders in other OECD countries. So that is a business risk. And that's what I meant is, ultimately, I think you can, of course, and I think, again, as you align your ESG strategy with your brand and your reputation, that's part of your narrative. But, to the point of how do you bring along the way and how do you engage and get commitment from your senior execs, talk the language of business.
Fantastic. Let's start with some questions. We have a lot of these. So a question from Faith Kiribo. How can we effectively measure and report on our environmental and social impacts, particularly in relation to sustainable agriculture practices and the use of pesticides in regard to CSRD?
I'm gonna send that one right back to you, Laetitia, because I would have to admit that we're not really in this field, so I have very limited exposure to that.
Yeah. So, how you can effectively report on your environmental and social impacts. This is we could spend hours on the topic, but there are tools. We mentioned the tools that Marcus used. So in particular for sustainable agriculture, this is a little bit outside of the topic today, but yeah, it's today there are many ways to embark your colleagues. So I would say it's a lot of communication into having all stakeholders working together on this project, and finding the right tools to help you. Next question: how do you correctly engage with suppliers and collect as much primary data as possible after prioritizations, product LCAs, end of life, etc.? And when doing so, what are your processes behind assessing quality, third party?
Yeah, so there's again a number of tools. I think there's a native tool within the Greenly platform to do so. The issue that I sometimes see there is that because it's not a platform owned by procurement, that can sometimes be a bit of an issue because, again, there are a lot of procurement source-to-pay platforms out there that have a supplier engagement module in there as well. So, and sometimes the issue also is that that platform run by procurement doesn't collect the direct spend, but only the indirect spend from a procurement perspective. So you don't always capture all of the suppliers. The number one thing, regardless of tools you want to do, is make sure that your procurement team has an understanding of what you're trying to achieve and what you have to achieve. Again, business enabler. Procurement is a critical business enabler as well. They will understand that language. If you tell them that if in EcoVadis you score anywhere below, on the sustainable procurement pillar, you score anywhere below, I don't know, I'm making this up, 30 points, that means that potentially you will be excluded moving forward by certain customers because they consider that there's just too much risk in your own supply chain in order for them to do business with you. So I think the first step is to actually do a proper analysis of your supplier base. So really understand what are the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, understand how much you spend with which suppliers, what are the strategic suppliers, et cetera, and then jointly with procurement. So what we've done, for example, we worked on a sustainable supplier policy together in a workshop format with them. Again, that creates the buy-in. It creates the opportunity for them to learn more about best practices from a sustainable procurement perspective. And you can then also clearly say, okay, now that we have this policy in place, we have to operationalize it. How do we operationalize it? What does that mean? What does it require? And basically building a supplier engagement program that is not about not just about pricing, contracts, contract renewals, et cetera, but also about making sure that you determine certain thresholds and criteria together with procurement, where you say, well, any company that does not comply or has not signed up to, again, making this up, the UNGC, we're not going to do business with. And then you have to make sure that they enforce it. So it really is, again, a separate work stream that you want to put in place together with the CPO, Chief Procurement Officer. It is a complex piece of work, but actually it ultimately helps them as well make better choices in terms of de-risking the supply chain of the company.
Thank you very much.
I just realized that the product LCA piece, that is something that we're struggling with. So I don't yet have the solution to that, unfortunately.
Next question, when reporting with spend-based methodology, did you use industry average / benchmark data?
So if I'm not mistaken, and again, Laetitia, you're probably in a better position to answer this. We heavily relied on Greenly for this. I think the International Protocol on Greenhouse Gas provides such a framework, and you do want to make sure that the methodology you use, especially if you rely on that data to do a CDP report or an SBTI report. You absolutely want to make sure that you use the right framework. And here again, the very capable consultants at Greenly can help navigate that topic. That's what we did. We heavily relied on the insight of the Greenly teams.
Yeah, so at Greenly, we always favorize the physical approach, but it's true that when customers are in a hurry to get a very broad picture, we can work with with spend-based methodology according to the GHG protocol, of course. And so we have a database with industry average benchmark data, but also suppliers specific for some large suppliers, as we're seeing again and again. So so there's a bit of everything, but of course it's not the favored methodology. Question from sorry, go ahead.
I would certainly say if you can avoid it, don't use spend-based analysis, or do a mix. For example, in our case, we only have a handful of manufacturing sites, but we have a lot of offices. And in a lot of the offices, we will be using spend-based equivalencies for emissions factors, simply because we don't have detailed information about water spend, electricity, etc., etc. So again, you want to make sure that the number of sites, for example, that are responsible for the majority of your emissions, collect whenever you can activity-based data for those. And if you're limited in time or resources, define which criteria or cutoff criteria for sites that, for example, you want to use spend-based equivalency data.
Thank you. We have a question from O, which is going through the same process as you are right now. So she's asking, did you conduct the double materiality analysis outside of the platform?
So we're still, as I said, kind of in the process of it, but we're again doing a bit of a hybrid approach in terms of looking at best practices, and we're relying on the Greenly team. So it's not just the platform, but it is very much also about the additional insight that you get from the Greenly experts. So yeah, we're doing a bit of a hybrid approach at the moment. We're still in the middle, but we're along the journey. So can't quite answer that one. And I'm not sure maybe if there's a specific question, underlying question there but yeah, perhaps ask an additional question there that we can help guide.
Tell us more. Other question from O. From a strategic perspective, was the DMA questionnaire from Greenly the main point of the conversation with the owners and sponsors that you assigned?
Yes.
Did that help them focus better on their areas and helping them progress on your ESG journey?
I would say so, absolutely. So, for example, if some of you, as some of you might have, if some of you work with some of the big, big five accounting or consulting firms, such as PwC, KPMG, etc., they of course have their full program that they will sell to you. I would say that another key aspect perhaps is consistency. You do want to make sure that you're consistent throughout. So of course you will be leveraging different resources, external resources, to help you with that journey. But I think what you want to avoid is definitely veering off the path that you're on with, because the sole source of truth is your data. And I think linking it back to your data points is critical, and therefore I would definitely recommend, again, keep it simple as well, because your double materiality analysis will also provide you with your improvement plan focus areas. And your improvement plan focus areas, you'll have to be able to measure those, and therefore being able again to connect the dots is something valuable, as opposed to having to do that on ad hoc basis.
Thank you very much. Next question is, how did you approach the assessment of which data points to report and which not, which I assume was the double materiality analysis? but there is indeed a high level of a high degree of subjectivity. So how did you approach this subjectivity?
Yeah, so again, there's the notion of relying on the experts at Greenly who have done this. This is going to be our first. We're not done with it yet, but to your point, there is a degree of subjectivity. Where we are happy that we have a little bit more time is also to see how the omnibus initiatives will be panning out. I have to admit, I'm all for simplicity. I think at this point in time, the more automation we can get into data collection and reporting, etc., the better, because that frees up time for us to focus more on the improvement initiatives, which is ultimately the goal of any ESG program. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure that helps, but for sure there is a degree of subjectivity. 100% agreed. You do need guidance from experts, which we are not. I do have someone who's very capable on the team who's able to relate that back, but it does require, I think, and in a way, again, coming back to the notion of speak business. Of course, you're an ESG expert, but your ESG expertise is only worth so much as your intricate understanding of your business, and therefore being able to relate that back. The more you understand how your business works at the very minute, shop floor level, dare I say, the better, because that'll help you navigate the which chapters you need to fill in.
Thank you very much, Marcus. There's another question, which I guess applies only if you've ever done the risk assessment on ISO 9001, 14001, 45001 management solutions, is how the double materiality assessment different from this risk assessment program, and can they be combined?
I'm gonna be very tempted to throw that one back at you, Laetitia.
Yeah, I expected that. So I'm not super familiar with the risk assessments of these ISO norms, but of course they can be combined because CSRD is made. I mean, the double materiality of the CSRD is made to assess the risks. So if you have the answers already from your previous ISO, that can definitely be applied to the double materiality. But the double materiality as something pretty new in the double sense. So it's what I was saying at the beginning, not only how the environment weight on your business and how the fact the global warming, etc., is affecting your business, but also how your business, your activity is affecting our environment. And so I guess this part is not contained in the ISO. So that may be one of the main differences, and that's at least one of the main innovations of the double materiality. Relations with your suppliers, Marcus. So when asking your suppliers for data, how do you help them understand that this is time-consuming and difficult process can be a strength down the line?
So it's a very good point, because what I've noticed in my current and previous role is that there's potentially a lot of resentment from suppliers, and because ultimately we're all part of someone's scope 3, right? So we all have to contend with that, and we all know that when you participate in an RFP, your sales teams, etc., you get these very extensive ESG questionnaires, etc., etc. What really helps, I think, and this is again an area where I think the more suppliers are being sourced throughout the module of Greenly. Greenly have a supplier engagement platform. Mm-hmm. So in some cases, all they have to do is, or you have to do, is say, okay, this supplier is already in the database. They've already uploaded all of their credentials. All I have to do is, click, validate, all good. Now, in our case, again, it's a little bit different because we've been shifting our supply, our global value chain, and therefore with it, our supply base as well. So the challenge there is been doing it in a crescendo mode, right? So we're gradually ramping up the number of data points we request from our suppliers. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you. It works well. Still frozen on the picture, but we hear you.
We're doing it in a two-step approach. First, we've started collecting very basic information manually. Stuff like, are you a member of the UNGC? Which other similar initiatives or industry-specific initiatives are you signed up to? Please provide us with those credentials. And then there's a number of basic compliance questions that we simply have to ask, which may already be present in the contractual terms and conditions, but that you're not, on an ESG perspective, not necessarily aware of. So there, again, the way we approach this is actually through, again, a working group together with our legal team, our international trade team that sits within legal, and procurement. And we made sure that, and especially now as we are kind of rolling out a new platform for procurement, we are an integral part of the configuration process to make sure that we ask all the right questions. Now, I don't know if you've experienced this, but in our case, what we often get is a very long and lengthy PDF document from a prospective customer that you're expected to read and simply sign off on. Otherwise, you can't do business with them. And in some cases, the bigger a company and the more prestigious company you are, and the bigger the spend you have with the supplier, the easier that is to do. Coming back to my point about making sure you map your suppliers, your strategic suppliers, engage them in a different way. Be more strict with them. Make sure that I don't know. Again, making this up. If your top 10 suppliers are basically, if you spend 80% with your top 10 suppliers, then focus on those. Make sure that the smaller suppliers, you do the basics just on a compliance basis. And for your key suppliers, make sure that you have a more effective program in place. A lot of the mature companies actually have a sustainability person sitting within procurement, and maybe some of you on the call today are in that situation. I would strongly encourage that, if your organization can afford it, to actually have an ESG functional expert within the procurement team to help manage all of those complex Scope 3 aspects.
Thank you. And yes, I would add, for your suppliers, you need to know that you're not the only one asking for it. And so doing it the first time with you would not be time loss for them, because they will get these questions again and again. So it's a key point in engaging them, to know that it will not be just you bothering them, but a general aspect of their new purchasing, like selling strategy. Questions about buy-in from executives. How? We try to collect data from marketing, sales, KPI on our ESG own, and submit this data to encourage for someone to assess ROI of ESG. And I guess Teresa is wondering how you're working this out with all the departments. We've touched upon it, but maybe you have a more specific answer.
I might sound a little bit like a broken record, but when you start creating the sense of urgency because you've calculated the risk of business loss, and especially for functions that have a direct contribution to it, that usually helps. And the reason why that is that if you look at the way every company has their own way of incentivizing their executives on a variable part of the compensation. In some cases, it's revenue based. In some cases, it's EBITDA based. Learn how to speak their language. Say, well, actually, for marketing for sales, it's pretty straightforward. For marketing, perhaps a little bit more challenging. But ultimately, if you understand how they're incentivized and relate that back to a specific contribution if you manage to show them how ESG helps achieve their objectives and their goals, that really helps. Now, in some cases, I'm in the process of trying to get this done towards the tail end of the process. We're a little bit late on that, but making sure that our, at least the key functions that have the biggest impact on our ESG performance, that they have a direct incentive as part of their annual objectives, with a weighting attached to it in terms of their bonus achievement. Again, that I've noticed that helps. Otherwise, if you don't have that, I think ultimately you don't want to do that. But if you have your CEO's support, I'm someone I don't like company politics. The only politics I subscribe to are the ones where you know how to play people in a certain way in order to get the best or the best outcome for the business. And in some cases, if you have to put in talk to your CEO before, let them know that an email is going to be coming because you're going to send an email to the CMO asking for this and this data, that they're being late and that they're compromising certain aspects of your business. If you have to do that, play hardball.
It's a great way to finish this webinar. And I'm sorry we didn't have time to address all the questions, but I'm realizing that time has flown by, and that it's already 1 hour long. So we will set the questions aside. We have the same seminar tomorrow in French. If some French speakers here want to join tomorrow as well, but I guess it will be a bit repetitive. Thank you very much, Marcus, for your insights. Those were super interesting. Great to know how it really feels and how it really works from a very operational perspective. So thanks for sharing this. And as you suggest, don't hesitate to look out for Marcus on LinkedIn. And let's continue driving the way for a more sustainable future. For compliance, for ESG, but mostly for the strategy of and competitiveness of our businesses. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.